When I learned that Robert's affair was with my sister, I didn't cry or make a scene. In fact, when they held their wedding, I even smiled as I gave Chloe a substantial wedding gift of $200,000, wishing them a lifetime of happiness. Everyone thought I had lost my mind, but they didn't know this was a meticulously planned revenge. My name is Olivia. I run 3 beauty boutiques, with an annual profit of about $3 million, making me a successful businesswoman. My husband, Robert, works as an office worker at a mid-sized company. His salary isn't high, but the CEO of that company is my friend Sarah. I could secretly arrange for Robert to get raises and benefits. Sarah always said I was a devoted fool, claiming Robert must have done something right in a past life to find such a good wife as me. However, Robert had no idea about any of this. Of course, he also didn't know I was a business owner. He always thought I was just a sales associate at a cosmetics counter. I believe marriage should be built on equality. I quietly earned money for my husband to spend, not wanting to put too much pressure on him, so I always kept this little secret. I had planned to tell him and surprise him when I had saved enough money, and the time was right. But unexpectedly, by chance, I discovered Robert's secret. His behavior was extremely unusual, and he might have been involved in an inappropriate relationship with my sister. That day, because a client canceled our appointment last minute, I bought Robert's favorite slow-cooked ribs, and went home early. Standing at the door, I found I couldn't open it. I was about to call Robert to get the locksmith, but then I noticed a small flyer stuck on the door. On a whim, I dialed a number, and surprisingly, the locksmith arrived so quickly. He said this kind of fingerprint lock was quite complex and would cost $280. I didn't care. As long as the door opened and I could cook the ribs, it was fine. The door opened, and clothes were scattered everywhere in the living room. Faint sounds came from the bedroom. The locksmith saw this and quickly left. I stormed into the bedroom. Robert was lying on the bed, casually scrolling on his phone. "Honey, you're back." He hastily turned off his phone, attempting to get up and hug me. Just then, the bedroom door opened again and Chloe excitedly rushed in. "Darling, I'm done with my shower." When she saw me, she shrieked and ran out. At that moment, I caught the panic and embarrassment on Robert's face. "Honey, it's a misunderstanding. Do you believe me?" Robert stood before me, begging for forgiveness. I looked at him coldly. "Do you take me for a 3-year-old? Robert, I really misjudged you." I suppressed my nausea and said sharply, "I've witnessed a scene like this, and you still want to argue? How utterly disappointing. How dare he conspire with my sister?" It was outrageous. In marriage, I had always believed in mutual respect and would never tolerate betrayal. This was the first time I felt such disappointment in my marriage. It's all my fault. He didn't have any intentions toward me. I'll move out. I promise I won't interfere with your lives ever again." Chloe cried, tears streaming down her face, looking utterly helpless. She even knelt down, repeatedly saying it was all her fault for implicating her brother-in-law. He was never good at lying, and what he said now sounded so sincere. Seeing her like this, my heart ached for her even more. My parents died in a car accident when I was 16, and Chloe and I had depended on each other ever since. My love for her was bone deep, but I never expected her to be involved with my husband. This was truly letting the fox into the henhouse. Beyond the anger and sadness, there was a deeper sense of despair for my marriage and for my family ties. I sent her to live in the old family house our parents had left us. At the same time, I had Sarah reduce Robert's salary to the minimum and canceled all the benefits he had previously received. For a while after that, Robert became extremely attentive, waiting on me hand and foot, taking care of all the chores, desperately trying to win me over. He even took on all the household chores he had never done before, just to beg for my forgiveness, constantly emphasizing that it was a misunderstanding. No matter how hard he tried, the scene from that day was replaying in my mind. Even though I hadn't caught them in the act, what I saw already confirmed the problem. The feeling of being betrayed by my husband and Chloe was unbearable, and a simple misunderstanding couldn't erase it. I took out the divorce papers. "Robert, let's get a divorce. I have high standards for relationships. You've tainted my marriage." Robert knelt again. "Honey, please give me another chance. I'll never do it again, never." I just shook my head. For several days in a row, Robert tried various ways to appease me, pleading for forgiveness, and desperately trying to prove his innocence, repeatedly insisting it was just a misunderstanding. He completely cut off contact with Chloe and acted extremely wronged, with red-rimmed eyes and looking exhausted for days. I wasn't heartless. I secretly checked Robert's communication records and observed his daily habits, and indeed, I couldn't find any concrete evidence of his infidelity. Had I truly misunderstood them? Seeing Robert, who used to do nothing and was spoiled by me, now diligently caring for me every day, I was momentarily dazed, wondering if I was being overly sensitive and had imagined the whole thing. Gradually, I began to relax my guard against Robert and stopped urging him to sign the divorce papers. One evening, Robert brought me a soothing herbal tea. "Honey, you've been under too much stress lately. Have some tea," he added. I specifically looked into this. It can help relieve stress, soothe nerves, promote relaxation, and generally improve well-being. It's good for you. I looked at myself in the vanity mirror. I did look much more haggard. Even my complexion had darkened, all because of this cheating scandal. "Honey, I've taken time off from work," Robert said. "I'll stay home with you for a while. I'll cook for you, take you out. I haven't spent enough time with you these past years. It's my fault." Robert said, "I understand now that as a husband, neglecting your company made you distrust me. From now on, I want to rebuild that trust. Do you remember how good things were when we first met?" Robert held the teacup, his eyes full of nostalgia for past times, rambling on with many words, sweet nothings I had never heard from him before. My feelings were complicated, and I wrestled with whether to keep dwelling on something that might have just been a misunderstanding. "Honey, I know this incident has hurt you deeply. I will definitely make it up to you. I don't know how to prove it was a misunderstanding, but right now, I just want you to stop feeling down and be happy again soon. Let's revisit our beautiful memories. Let's go rock climbing to relax. I want to retrace the paths we once took." Hearing the word rock climbing, my heart stirred. That was Robert and my most cherished youthful memory. As if compelled by an unseen force, I actually didn't refuse him. Robert and I were both rock climbing enthusiasts. We met during a climbing event, and those were our happiest times. Before boarding the plane, I still made a brief call to my best friend, Sarah, to tell her a few things. Although I was just going out to clear my head, I had a habit of always telling my best friend my itinerary before any trip, just in case something unexpected happened, so she would know in time. It was a habit developed over many years. At the same time, I still had reservations about Robert's situation. After all, rock climbing is a dangerous sport, and human nature is complex. For this trip, I specifically asked Sarah to make extra preparations, and I also wanted to use this opportunity to observe Robert again. If he showed no abnormalities, then I would let the matter rest. If he did, I would have to cut ties swiftly and resolve it immediately. After getting off the plane, I felt particularly unwell, dizzy and disoriented the whole way. Upon arriving at the hotel, I had booked 2 rooms in advance. Robert came to take care of me, but I pushed him out. After closing the door, I lay down to rest but was soon awakened by a knock. Annoyed, I opened the door to find a strange Mrs. Davis. "Miss, is the person who came with you named Mark?" I shook my head blankly, not understanding what she was saying. "Strange, it's definitely Mark. I couldn't be mistaken," Mrs. Davis muttered to herself. As she spoke, Robert walked over. Mrs. Davis stared at him, then suddenly rushed forward and grabbed him. "Mark, you beast, give me back my daughter." Robert's face turned ashen as he tried to push her away, but the seemingly frail Mrs. Davis had astonishing strength. Robert, a 6-foot-tall man, couldn't shake her off. Other guests came out to watch the commotion. Under their pointing fingers, Robert's face flushed red, seemingly annoyed. He grabbed Mrs. Davis's wrist and forcefully flung her. Mrs. Davis hit the wall, a large lump immediately forming on her head, and then she collapsed to the floor. A Mr. Peterson pushed through the crowd, repeatedly apologizing to Robert, and helped Mrs. Davis away. That Mrs. Davis must have mistaken me for someone else. "I've never been called Mark," Robert said. I watched everything silently, an indescribable feeling rising in my heart. My female intuition told me this was no simple matter. Before going to sleep, the more I thought about it, the more something felt wrong. I called Sarah and told her about this strange incident. After a long pause, Sarah said, "I think things might be very serious. Robert might have gotten into trouble outside, and even entangled himself with other women. Also, don't talk about coincidences. There aren't that many coincidences in this world. And you said Robert wanted you to relax and go rock climbing. I always found that strange. Why choose such a high-risk activity like rock climbing instead of just traveling? Now with this situation, I suddenly wonder if he might have ill intentions towards you. After all, you proposed divorce, so he feels threatened, and these kinds of things are often reported in the news." Sarah's words made me uneasy. Indeed, the person closest to you could be your lifelong companion, or the one who sends you to an early grave. Olivia, you have so much money. If something happened, if. Sarah said slowly. Robert would be the first in line to inherit. She continued. There's one more thing I think I should tell you. Just as I was about to ask what it was, Sarah's call disconnected. I held the phone, pondering for a long time. It was very likely that Robert had other secrets, not just the affair with Chloe. I had to investigate thoroughly and start guarding against him. The next morning, Robert came to call me for a climb. I immediately rushed to the bathroom and threw up. I actually induced vomiting myself. As he said, Robert and I weren't divorced yet, my parents were deceased, and Robert's relationship with my sister was ambiguous. If something happened to me, Robert would be the biggest beneficiary, and now he was a potential threat. I had been truly careless on this trip. I spent an entire night adjusting my state, making myself more cautious. When Robert came into my room, I had already made myself look pale and sickly, lying weakly on the bed. I can't go rock climbing. I've been throwing up and having diarrhea for some reason. Maybe it's the local water. Or my body is just too worn out from years of stress. I lay in bed, feigning a pathetic look. Robert's face was gentle. Honey, I'll go buy you some medicine. You rest well. While he was downstairs, I called Sarah and immediately heard shocking news. Robert had previously gone by the name Mark. He might be involved in identity fraud and possibly even criminal offenses. Sarah's words sent chills down my spine, making me break out in a cold sweat. This sudden turn felt like a bolt from the blue. The urgent priority was to go home. But before that, I had to clarify one thing. So, I cleverly avoided Robert, and went to the hospital to visit the injured Mrs. Davis. She said that Mark was her former son-in-law. 2 years after her daughter got married, she said she was going rock climbing with Mark, and then an accident happened. They never found her daughter's body. Mark only gave them a small portion of her daughter's assets and accident insurance. He absconded with the rest. The elderly couple didn't care about the money. They just wanted justice for their daughter. But Mark quickly disappeared. Being old, they had nowhere to search and had been waiting here, both for the killer and for their deceased daughter. That man is Mark. Even if he's slightly changed his appearance, I'd recognize him, Mrs. Davis sobbed. I was too shocked to speak. Before, Sarah and I had only speculated that Robert might be problematic, but I never imagined it would be like this. I suppressed my heartache and fear, comforted Mrs. Davis, and then left, secretly resolving to divorce him as soon as possible. When booking the plane ticket, I suddenly thought that if I just went back like this, Robert would definitely become suspicious. Since he was capable of such acts, his methods must be ruthless, and I might very well become his next victim. I had to come up with a foolproof plan. Sure enough, when I returned to the hotel, he was already waiting in the room. You're not feeling well. Yet you've been out for so long? Was there something so important you couldn't let me do? I smiled and vaguely replied. I went to see a doctor. In this unfamiliar city, where else could I go? On the way back to the hotel, I had texted Sarah, asking her to help me figure out a way to return without raising suspicion. Soon my cousin Emily called, saying Chloe had been in a car accident and I needed to rush back. No matter what, she was my sister, so Robert had no reason to stop me from going. I went straight to the hospital after getting off the plane. I went in to see her. Robert stood outside the door the whole time. Chloe was lying in the hospital bed, bruised and swollen. From the looks of it, she wasn't seriously injured. I went to the nurse's station to ask about her condition. A fractured rib, sustained when she fell off her bike while answering a call. When I returned, Robert was no longer at the door. I heard a harsh voice from inside the room saying, "You're useless. I wouldn't have had to answer your call." A chill instantly ran through me. I had thought Robert was trying to harm me, but I never imagined my own sister, Chloe, was also involved. Their relationship wasn't just an ambiguous misunderstanding. It was more of a conspiracy. My heart sank instantly. This pain was 100 times worse than discovering Chloe and Robert's affair. I instinctively wanted to rush in. But Sarah's warning echoed in my mind. When dealing with people like this, stay calm. Don't panic, don't get flustered. Panic makes you vulnerable. So I took a deep breath and turned away. What good would it do to expose them? I had no evidence. At most, it would be a divorce. Then I'd watch Robert walk away scot-free. That wasn't the outcome I wanted. Liars and murderers must be punished severely. Now wasn't the best time. I had to endure and wait for the opportune moment to deliver a fatal blow. I tried to calm myself down, deliberately making my footsteps heavier as I returned to the ward. I comforted Chloe, telling her it was nothing serious and to rest well. Robert was already back at the door, his face expressionless. This man was becoming more and more frightening to me. I dared not go home. I made the excuse that I wanted to stay and take care of Chloe, sending Robert back first. I sat by the bed, looking coldly at Chloe. This was my own Chloe, my only blood relative in this world. She had barely worked since graduating. I gave her a $30,000 allowance every month, and I never refused her anything she wanted. I covered all her expenses. I never imagined that she would hate me so much for a man, even wishing me dead. I was completely disillusioned. As I left the ward, I sighed softly. Chloe, take good care of yourself. That was the only thing I, as her sister, could say. Everything seemed to return to peace, but only I knew that beneath the surface, undercurrents stirred, fraught with danger. I began to hire someone to investigate Robert. More accurately, Sarah was helping me investigate him. I had thought Robert had only harmed one woman, and since he hadn't succeeded with me, it didn't count. But the investigation results shocked me. Robert had been married twice before, each time under a different name, and both of his wives had died unexpectedly. He had received huge inheritances and insurance payouts from both. Shortly after obtaining these assets, he would disappear. Except for that elderly couple, no one had pursued him. He was very cunning. He would give a portion of the money to the families, then quickly vanish. Even if they searched, his identity was fake, so not only could they not find him, there was no evidence to prove he was the murderer. Thus, he had always evaded justice. And this time, he had targeted me. Could the name Robert also be fake? I dared not think about it. But one thing puzzled me. I had never told Robert that I owned shops with substantial income. I only said I was a low-earning sales associate. He couldn't possibly extract much from me, so why target me? Sarah laughed. Because you have no parents, and because you're young and have capital? I paused. My looks weren't exactly stunning. What capital? Accident insurance, Sarah said, taking a sip of coffee. If I'm not mistaken, Robert definitely took out a huge insurance policy on you. Plus, he's still after your money. I was stunned. Sarah continued to analyze. Do you think you can hide it from him? He's colluding with your Chloe, and you give Chloe $30,000 every month. Is Robert stupid? He's been eyeing you as a cash cow for a long time. Refusing to divorce, luring you to rock climbing, everything is aimed at you. I broke into a cold sweat. The accident insurance gave me goosebumps. During our honeymoon, Robert had sweet-talked me into signing a bunch of insurance agreements. At the time, I was infatuated and thought he loved and cared for me, but I never imagined it was a death trap. I suddenly remembered Chloe seemed to have mentioned this too, but I had forgotten about it. So I quickly contacted Mike, asking him to check if I had any accident insurance policies. Sure enough, just as Sarah said, Robert was the beneficiary. My first instinctive thought was that it was too dangerous. I had to get a divorce quickly, escape this executioner, and then make him pay for his actions. But Robert hadn't achieved his goal, so he wouldn't easily agree to a divorce. And now he was still living with me. I truly didn't know how he might try to get rid of me. This feeling of panic, of being held in someone's grasp, gave me a deep sense of suffocation. I was a bit flustered, but also filled with regret. I wasn't willing to give up. Help me think of something, I pleaded. Sarah shook her head. No concrete evidence and no good solution. How about this? I'll find an excuse to promote him and send him on a business trip. That way you'll be safer, and we'll have time to think of a plan. That's the only way. However, Sarah then looked as if she had something more to say but was hesitant. I grew a little agitated. What is it? I'm living on the edge of life and death every day. Don't make me guess riddles anymore. Never mind, maybe I'm overthinking it. Sarah waved her hand, starting to sip her now cold coffee, her gaze a little unfocused. I didn't press further, but my unease deepened. I quietly destroyed the divorce papers, fearing he might use them as a weapon. Robert was going away for a week on a business trip. This would give me more time to perfect my plan. When I struck, I wouldn't leave him any room for retaliation. It had to be a fatal blow, one he could never recover from. After Chloe was discharged from the hospital, she called me, saying she had difficulty moving around and wanted to stay at my place for a while. She also said, Robert's gone on a business trip, so you don't have to worry about anything between us. Only Sarah, Robert, and I knew about Robert's business trip. How did Chloe know? It seemed Robert told her everything. He had become completely reckless. I remained silent for a long time, eventually agreeing to her unreasonable request. Although she was heartless toward me, I couldn't be unrighteous. In the end, I took her in. Actually, I had another plan in mind. Although Chloe and Robert had been involved, no matter what, Chloe and I were still blood sisters, tied by bone and sinew. I didn't want to watch her walk step by step into the abyss. I thought that by letting her stay, if she could remember our family bond, I would abandon the plan brewing in my mind. But I stopped thinking that way when she moved in. Then, accidents started happening around the house. In the middle of the night, going to the bathroom, I almost fell because there was a large puddle of shower gel on the floor. At night, when I went to bed, the blanket felt damp inside, with a strange unknown smell. I asked Chloe if she had done it. She looked innocent. "Sis, do you really think I'm that bad? What do you think?" she cried. "I know you've always thought I was a bad person. You think I caused our parents' car accident. You've hated and resented me ever since they left. You keep saying you're my older sister, offering me petty gestures, but in your heart, you've always cursed me. I'll tell you honestly, Robert and I truly love each other. We've always been together. You stole my beloved. You're the most vicious woman in the world." I was speechless. This was me bringing trouble upon myself. I stopped paying attention to her. When I went to take a shower in the bathroom, I quickly smelled rotten eggs. By the time I reacted, I was already dizzy, my limbs weak. I wanted to call Chloe, but the smell grew stronger. I tried with all my might to pull open the bathroom door, but it wouldn't budge. In a haze, I saw Chloe's silhouette blurred through the glass door, vaguely seeing her sinister smile. I couldn't help but let out a bitter laugh. "Chloe, I've been nothing but good to you. I gave you a chance because of our blood relation, our kinship. Why didn't you cherish it? Attacking me is just digging your own grave." When I woke up, I was in the hospital. Sarah looked at me, full of worry. "You're so lucky to be alive." She sighed in relief. Based on her description, I reconstructed the rescue. It turned out she had something she wanted to tell me but couldn't find me. She remembered I once said that if I didn't answer my phone or messages, she should come save me. So, she immediately drove to my house. No one answered the door when she knocked. She had a spare key to my house. I had given her one after I returned from that rock climbing trip. I had told her that she was the only person in this world I could trust. After opening the door, she smelled a strong gas odor. Chloe was lying motionless in front of the bathroom door, and I was lying behind it. Chloe had also been poisoned. My mind was a bit confused. Before I lost consciousness, I clearly saw Chloe's sinister smile. Had I been hallucinating? "Sis." Chloe looked at me, pale-faced and in tears. "You scared me to death." I smiled but said nothing. I had originally thought I had misunderstood Chloe. How naive I was to think the best of human nature. As I feigned sleep in my hospital bed, I overheard Chloe on the phone saying the plan had failed, and that someone unexpected had shown up and saved her. If I wasn't mistaken, the person on the other end of the line was Robert. And I heard Chloe mention Sarah's name. Robert must have figured everything out. Robert returned after his business trip, pretending nothing had happened, showering me with concern. Chloe's face contorted with anger, and she started arguing with Robert in the hallway outside my room. Then I heard the crisp sound of a slap and Chloe's wails. Robert's face was ashen when he came in, his anxiety barely concealed in his eyes. I guess his two deceased wives weren't as difficult to deal with as I was. From initially being terrified to now seeing Robert's panic, I found it increasingly interesting. The call from Sarah made it even more ironic. Robert had actually pursued Sarah before. But Sarah wouldn't even consider a parasitic man like him. Only a soft touch like me would think of finding a man like Robert, who acts like a son. Truly, 20 years of friendship. And she spares no sarcasm. After being discharged, I had Chloe move out and drafted a new set of divorce papers. I deliberated over them more than a dozen times, and only felt at ease after confirming they were flawless. In the agreement, I didn't give Robert a single cent. I told him I had evidence of his infidelity, making him the at-fault party, and demanded he leave with nothing. All the assets in this house were originally funded by me anyway. Even if it went to court, he would surely lose. Faced with divorce papers that left him with nothing, Robert's expression changed. He wanted to back out and refuse, but I was prepared. I had already hired 2 burly bodyguards to protect myself. At the same time, I told him that if he didn't sign, I would sue for forced divorce. He had no chance of winning, and he had a criminal record. Having committed so many dishonest acts, he simply didn't dare to face me in court. Under the watchful eyes of the bodyguards, Robert packed his bags and left the house. Where he went was none of my business, but I had no intention of letting him off the hook so easily. He had to pay for everything he had done. I looked at the signed divorce papers and cried a good, long cry. Finally, I wiped away my tears and called Sarah, asking her to help me put on a show. At the same time, I arranged to meet Chloe alone and told her that Robert and I were divorced, and that I had given him $500,000 in assets. I even showed Chloe the divorce papers. Of course, this agreement was one I had drafted separately, and the signatures were forged. This agreement was merely to mislead people, but it was enough to fool someone as naive as Chloe. I also told Chloe that Robert was pursuing Sarah. No way. He said he was going to marry me. Chloe's face instantly turned pale with urgency. I sneered and showed her a video of Robert and Sarah having coffee together. Sarah was sitting next to Robert in such a perfect pose that even I almost believed they were a real couple, let alone Chloe. Chloe was furious. Watching Robert's hasty departure after paying for the coffee, I knew my plan had succeeded. From then on, Chloe started looking for Robert everywhere, and Robert avoided Chloe in every way possible. Actually, if Robert had just disappeared at that point, we wouldn't have bothered to look for him. We would have simply turned over the evidence of his suspected crimes to the police. But Robert didn't leave, nor did he resign from his job, clearly indicating he had other intentions. At the time of my divorce, Sarah asked, "Are you really going to let that scum off the hook just like that? If he runs, you might never find him. After he hurt you so deeply, are you willing to just let it go?" I smiled calmly. Of course not, but I know he won't run. The first 2 times he succeeded, getting large inheritances and compensation. Of course, he transferred those funds quickly, but this time he gained nothing, so he's naturally unwilling to have wasted these 2 years. Just like a gambler who wins money and then loses it, he'll try every means to recover his losses. Yes, Robert is a gambler, a complete gambling addict. All the money he got has been lost over the years. This time he didn't succeed, so he'll quickly look for his next target. Sarah and Chloe are his targets. As long as he still has greedy ambitions, our plan will definitely succeed. Chloe cornered Robert downstairs at his company, fully displaying her true, aggressive nature. She desperately tugged at Robert's arm, yelling hysterically, "If you dare betray me, I'll expose everything." Robert's face was grim. I had expected Robert to simply shake Chloe off, but to my surprise, he actually agreed to marry her. I was very curious about what leverage Chloe had over him that made him so wary. Actually, I was very reluctant to see Chloe marry Robert. Not because Robert was once my husband, but because Chloe was my sister, my own sister. Ultimately, I didn't want to push her into a fire pit. But Chloe was precisely the kind of person who was stubborn to a fault, unwilling to learn from mistakes. She showed no shame in snatching her sister's husband, and even sent wedding invitations to Sarah and me as a display. I suppressed my anger, thinking of the long-planned scheme in my heart, and gritted my teeth as I gave a $200,000 wedding gift. When the officiant announced the amount of my gift, the entire hall erupted in murmurs. I stacked the money on the table, one pile after another, and looked at Chloe. "Chloe, congratulations." Chloe's face was beaming with triumph, while Robert beside her struggled to conceal the greed in his eyes. On the way back, I finally couldn't hold back my tears. This was her own choice. "You did your best," Sarah sighed softly. "I really didn't want to." Tears finally streamed down my face. "She's my sister. I know that because of this $200,000, I might lose my only family member forever." Robert and Chloe chose Phuket, Thailand, a picturesque place, for their honeymoon. I personally saw them affectionately board the plane and check into their hotel. Their loving display was enviable. The first day was normal, the second day was normal. More than half of their 7-day trip had passed, and the day after tomorrow was their return date. And Robert still hadn't made a move. I thought, have I misjudged him? Or has Robert truly turned over a new leaf? As Chloe said, maybe they are truly in love. No matter how Chloe treated me in the past, we are sisters after all. If things aren't as I imagined, I'm willing to offer my sincere blessings. But human nature can never be overestimated. The day before their return, I saw Robert take Chloe to a renowned rock climbing destination. Initially, they followed other tourists, but gradually, they deviated from the normal route. Watching the video, my heart twisted. I knew Robert was going to use his old trick again. Soon, I received a call saying that Chloe had accidentally fallen off the cliff and hadn't been found yet. It seemed the odds were stacked against her. Tears welled up in my eyes. Sarah sent me the entire video. The tracking person's filming technique was professional. Robert's hand pressing on Chloe's back, pushing her, was clearly visible in the footage. I knew that if I gave this to the police, Robert would spend the rest of his life in prison, but I felt that was too easy for him. Was losing his freedom such a simple punishment for a man whose hands were stained with blood? Robert returned alone. As the first in line to inherit, he would inherit Chloe's $200,000 and part of the ownership of my parents' old family house. Because the house was still under our parents' names, Chloe and I both had inheritance rights. This time, I seemed to have lost badly. At Chloe's funeral, Robert cried very sadly, but I could clearly see that every wrinkle around his eyes was smiling. $200,000, plus a house worth over $2 million. His smile was arrogant, as if proclaiming his victory. Even if he obtained this money by sacrificing his conscience and staining his hands with blood, he didn't care at all. Robert asked me how to handle the house, saying he was too sad and wanted to go back to his hometown to recuperate. He could transfer that portion of the property to me at a low price. How much? $1 million, I guess. I sneered. Is one human life only worth $1 million? $900,000 then, if that works. Seeing my sneer, Robert grew a little flustered. The minimum is $850,000, no less. I agreed, mainly because I was afraid he would run off and I'd have to go to great lengths to find him again, as my plan wasn't fully executed yet. A few days later, Robert called me, asking how the money collection was going. If it was difficult, he could accept $750,000. I said it was difficult and asked for a few more days. Then Robert would call me every few days, and the price kept dropping, finally reaching $400,000. Robert grew anxious and came directly to me. Olivia, I can't wait any longer. You said before you had $400,000. Let's just use that money. I spread my hands and said, I wanted to arrange Chloe's wedding. Where would I have that kind of money? Robert stared at me intently. After some time apart, he had lost his former luster, his hair greasy, his face dark. $200,000? I smiled, nodded, and said, Wait here, I'll get the money. With that, I opened the door. Chloe sat in a wheelchair, eyes blazing as she glared at Robert. Robert, you murderer. Chloe hadn't died. Although I hated her, she was my only blood relative in this world. I couldn't stand by and watch her die. Before her wedding, I had wanted to tell her the truth, but that silly girl didn't care and wouldn't listen to her sister. Since I couldn't educate her, then let the truth educate her. All of Chloe and Robert's movements in Phuket, Thailand, were under my surveillance, and the final outcome was also within my expectations. It was like knowing a moth flying into a flame would surely die, yet it still clung to its delusion, determined to rush forward even if it meant death. Chloe was pushed off the cliff. Falling from such a height, it was impossible not to be injured. The people I sent immediately took Chloe to the hospital. She suffered a cervical spine injury and underwent a major operation. Although her life was saved, she would spend the rest of her life in a wheelchair, with countless surgeries awaiting her. Before Robert returned to US, I had already brought Chloe back and made her watch her own funeral from start to finish, letting her witness firsthand how Robert haggled with me. I even showed her a video of how happily Robert laughed when no one was around. At that moment, she could only weep helplessly. Of course, I would never let Robert off the hook so easily. My revenge had only just begun. Sarah, Mike, and I found the families of Robert's 2 deceased wives. Before Chloe's incident, I had wondered why Robert had repeatedly succeeded without being suspected. It was simply what women called love, blinded by their love. Because the elderly couple knew me, the insurance friend stepped forward and told them he was from the insurance company, suspecting that a case involved insurance fraud, and asked for their cooperation in the investigation. The painful scars were reopened, and both the elderly couple and the other family's relatives wept bitterly.